Hello, today's guest is Dr. Brent Ridge, co-founder of Beekman 1802 and co-author of Goat Wisdom. Brent's story is not a traditional business success story. It's a purpose and alignment story. Before building a $150 million values-driven lifestyle brand, Brent was a physician, professor, and healthcare innovator at Mount Sinai, where he helped design the Martha Stewart Center for Living and later served as vice president for healthy living at Martha Stewart Living Omni Media. After the 2008 recession reshaped his career, Brent and his partner Josh Kilmer Purcell moved to a small goat farm in upstate New York. What began as a search for meaning became Beekman 1802, a brand rooted in community, kindness, and purpose-first leadership. That's why I'm so excited to have Brent here with us today. I was introduced to Brent through our mutual friend, Sally Hogshead. And after hearing his story, I was completely fascinated. Brent's story is a living example of what it means to lead with purpose. Hello, Brent. Welcome to the program.
Oh, thanks for being here. Thanks for having me, Mark. And yes, if Sally Hogshead says you're fascinating, then you've got your stamp of approval.
Absolutely. What an amazing introduction she gave. And it's a cool backstory about how you two met. And that's, of course, what led us to meeting together. I'm curious, before you built Beekman 1802 and before it even existed, you and Josh made a very curious step away from the traditional definitions of success. We talked about this not being a traditional success story. What was missing in your lives at the time? Because to everybody else, it would seem like you had the perfect dreamy life. But what were you really saying yes to when you chose the farm?
Well, I would say money, just like everybody else. But
okay.
I'll expand on that because it's not kind of the typical quest for money. As you pointed out, we were living and working in New York City. Both Josh and I had grown up in very rural locations. I grew up in rural North Carolina. Josh grew up in rural Wisconsin. And we're both very hard workers, very studious, people throughout our, youth, because we saw our intellect as the only way to escape the environments of which we were. Not that we didn't like the environments where we were living or where we were raised. It's just that we didn't see opportunity in the environments where we were raised. And so for both of us, we had used our intelligence to find our way to New York City because we thought that was the place where we were going to make our biggest mark. And so I was doing my medical residency at Columbia University when I first met Josh. We've been together now for 26 years. He was working in advertising as a junior, advertising executive. And, we started our personal relationship. And, I ultimately became on faculty at Mount Sinai Hospital. And then after Mount Sinai Hospital, I joined the faculty there. And after that, went back to business school at NYU, thinking I might want to use my knowledge of longevity and aging in the business world somehow as the baby boomers became older. Like that was my thought process. Like, how can I impact as many people as possible to make better life choices? And so that was my impetus for going to business school. And went back to work after business school at Mount Sinai with this objective of creating this new center for the study of aging. And that's how I first connected with Martha, because I wanted a benefactor and a role model for better aging. And so we worked together to create the Martha Stewart Center for Living. As you said, I then joined her company. During that time period, Josh just continued to, advance his career in advertising, winning many awards. He won a Cannes Line Award, and just at the top of his career, became a partner at an ad agency. And so in 2006, we were both around 30 years old. We thought, we have made it. We are in New York City and we are, hanging out with the right people. And, we just have grabbed the brass ring. And, if people who are listening who were around in, the year 2000, 2006, you'll know that was the period where they were just handing out free mortgages, right? They're like, you can do this and you cannot. And so all of our friends who were in similar, situations in New York City at the time, they were all buying their second homes. Like they were buying their home in the Hamptons or wherever they were buying them. And we were going on an apple picking trip in upstate New York one weekend, which is kind of our custom fall thing that we would do. And every year we would open up a map of New York State and we would close our eyes and do this. And wherever our finger landed, we would find an apple orchard near that town. And that was our weekend kind of fall trip. And so this one weekend in 2006, our finger landed on this little town called Sharon Springs. We Googled apple orchard near Sharon Springs. There was an apple orchard there, Sharon Orchards. And so we drove up there. And driving around that weekend, we saw this beautiful farmhouse, and it had a for sale sign in the yard. And we, on the way back to the city, our drive back to the city, we're like, we want that farm. And I remember I had the brochure for the farm, the real estate brochure. I was in a meeting with Martha. We were getting ready to do the TV show. I used to go on air and do the TV show. And I said, Martha, I saw this farmhouse. And she said, buy it. And I said, okay, got Martha's stamp of approval. we're going to do it. And so we cashed in everything we had ever saved to that moment in our lives. Took out $1 million mortgage because it was kind of a free, zero, low interest mortgage, and bought this farm. And this was how obnoxious we were, how as 30-year-old professionals can be obnoxious. We were going to use this huge, empty, 60-acre, 200-year-old farm as a weekend place. Like that was how obnoxious we were.
For the two of you.
For the two of us. And so we kind of got into this rhythm of every weekend we would leave work on Friday, get the train, take it up to upstate New York, go to the farm. And our idea was, okay, we're just going to have a garden. We're going to raise some of our own food. And it's just like our thing. That's what we're going to do. And one weekend we came up from the city and opened up the mailbox on the farm. And there was a note in the mailbox, this handwritten letter. And it said, hi, my name is John, and I grew up in this area on a dairy farm, and I now have a herd of 100 goats, but I'm losing my farm. Could I please bring my goats to your property to graze? Otherwise, I'll have to sell the herd. Now, of course, this is a very tiny community, so everybody knew these two New York City guys bought this farm, and they're only using it on the weekends, so that was like crazy to them too. And so he took the chance and put this letter because he was he was desperate. And we say that was the original act of kindness that started the company. Because we met with him, we could tell how much he loved these animals. And there was another little cottage on the property anyway. And we said, you know what? You just come live in that cottage. When we're not here, somebody will be here, which is great. You keep an eye on things. You can have the goats there. Fine. And the reason that was the original act of kindness that ultimately became Beekman 1802 was because 2 years later, in the recession of 2008, the division that I was heading at Martha Stewart in health and wellness folded because it was not a core to the company. Josh's advertising agency, where he had reached partner status, folded. And we were both within a month of each other out of a job. And for those of you who might have been around and living in New York City at the time of that financial crisis, there were so many people out of work that you could not fathom that many people finding jobs again. That's what it was like. And so we decamped to the farm. And I would say for the first 6 months that we were there, we were very depressed because, again, we had worked really hard our whole lives to reach the point that we thought we were. And when you live and work in New York City, your whole identity is attached to your career. And so we just felt like everything had been pulled right out from underneath us. And so we were depressed and we really didn't know what we were going to do or how we were going to get back to where we were. And it was, I remember the winter. I remember the moment so crystal clear in my head. It was so cold, upstate New York, very cold. It was so cold that snow would blow in under the doors of the farmhouse and not melt. Like that's because we couldn't afford to heat it. It's a big drafty old farmhouse. We couldn't afford to heat it. And so we would spend a lot of time out in the barn. And for those of you who have never spent time on a farm that has animals, particularly in the Northeast, the animals are all kept in the barn, over the winter because it's cold outside. They can't tolerate that level of cold. And what happens is you put the hay in the loft, and that insulates the loft, the barn from the top. And then as the animals, produce their manure, during the winter, you can't muck out the barn during the winter. So you just keep adding fresh hay on top, and it gets patched down. And so all of that compost generates heat. And then you've got insulation from the top, from the hay loft, and that's what keeps the animals warm during the winter. And so in the barn, you've got like this constant, I would say 68, 70 degree temperature, no matter how cold it is outside, because of those two things. And so we would spend a lot of time in the barn because it was warm. And we would just watch the goats, and we say we became the men who stared at goats. And one day we were out there, we're like, okay, what are we going to do here? And so we said, okay, what are our assets? Like, what do we have? And we knew that we were hard workers. We knew that we had this really strong sense of morals and ethics that we had been raised with, from our families in these rural locations. We knew that we were very creative and strategic thinkers. We knew that we had still some connections in the city from our careers in the city. Oh, and we have goats. Like that was kind of our list. And we said, okay, what can we do? What can we do? And so we Googled, what can we make with goat milk? And the first thing that popped up on the list was cheese. And we said, okay, we can't make cheese because it costs a lot of money to become a grade A certified dairy so that you can sell the cheese that you produce. So we didn't have the money to invest in that. And the second thing on the list was goat milk soap. And so we said, okay, soap it is. And so the next Google search was soap makers in Schoharie County, which was the county where we're located. And we found a soap maker who was making olive oil soaps. And we reached out to her and we said, hey, we read that you could make soap with goat milk. Can you teach us how? And soap maker Deb did. And she taught us how to make the bars of soap. And Josh learned how to code a website. And which back in 16 years ago, that was hard to do. It wasn't as easy as it is now. It was plug and play. And we first started selling the bars of soap on our website. Now, 16 years ago, nobody was making money on e-commerce, right? That was in the beginning days of e-commerce. And so I would say about 3 months in, we're like, okay, we're not going to come anywhere close to paying off $1 million mortgage with these soap sales from our website. And so I said, okay, where can we take this product where it does not already exist? And, normally when people think of a product like goat milk soap, very artisanal, they're like, okay, you're going to find it in a farmer's market or maybe some little craft store, some little, country store situation. And I said, no one is selling this type of product in the luxury setting. And because we had lived in New York City, we had shopped in all of these luxury stores before. We knew of them, right? We knew which ones we needed to be in if we were going to try to be successful. And so I loaded up a bag of the soaps, got on the train, went down into the city one day, and I cold called on every luxury department store on Fifth Avenue. Like literally, it was a cold call. Like I walked into the store and said, hey, is your beauty buyer here today? Can I speak to them? And I did it to everybody. Barney's, Saks, Bergdorf, Bloomingdale's.
What kind of responses were you getting when people were just...
Some of the buyers weren't there or wouldn't come out or wouldn't speak to anybody. Some buyers were gracious and said, no, we don't have, they were gracious people. And then there was one buyer at a store called Henry Bendel, which was, it's not, sadly no longer there, but it had been there for over 100 years. It was on Fifth Avenue. And the buyer there said, you know what? You're unproven, so we will not bring you in as a regular product. However, if you will come down here, we will give you a spot on our main floor for a period of time, and you can try to sell the product and educate the customer on this product. And if we see that there is traction, we will bring you in. And so I said, I will do it. And so every day, this was beginning like in September. So like September through the holiday period, they gave me a 3x3 table on the main floor. And every morning I would get up at the farm. I would drive the 3.5 hours into the city. I would set up on this table with the soaps, and I would stay there from the time the store opened until it closed, which I think was 8 o'clock. And then I would make the 3.5 hour drive back to the farm. And I did that every single day for 6 weeks. And so many things happened during that time period. One, you have to remember, I was a physician and an academic, a business person, but not a salesperson, right? And I had no real idea how to sell this product face to face. But I think because I looked like a deer caught in the headlights, so to speak, on this sales floor with all of these other really experienced sales women, primarily women, selling other beauty products, they kind of took me under their wing. And they're like, oh no, here's how you approach the customer, or here's how you get the product in their hand. And so I learned so much just by watching them, sell their product.
You got the 6-week crash course in sales.
I absolutely did. I absolutely 100% did. And I think still to this day, I'm like, just watch what other people are doing and learn from them. So that was the one big thing that happened. The next big thing that happened was that the beauty buyer from a store called Anthropology, which is owned by Urban Outfitters, but it's its own kind of chain of stores, kind of not high-end luxury, but aspirational store at the pop fashion store. Mm-hmm. She came through Henry Bendel on a scouting mission, just looking like, oh, what new brands are up and coming. She heard me tell the story about this product, and she handed me her card, and she said, you know what, this seems like a product that would do really well for us in Anthropology. And so a few weeks later, we connected, and she said, yeah, let's bring you in and give you a try. And so Anthropology became our first national account. And that following year, the big Christmas order they placed was about 52,000 bars of soap, because we were doing collections. And so we had about 7 months to prepare for it. And, we needed a national account, and that exposure, so importantly, that we basically said yes without really calculating, are we actually making money? It's, we just needed it. We needed the cash more than we need the cash flow more than we needed the profit at that moment. And so we took the order. We said yes. Now, I would say probably about 2 or 3 months into trying to get the order prepped, we realized, oh, we're only making like a nickel on each bar of soap. So we had to immediately say, okay, we can't afford to hire anybody. We have to do this all ourselves. Like, we're just like nose to the grindstone to get these orders out. Because people will know that if you take when you're working with a big national company like that, if you don't hit your shipping deadlines, it causes a huge cascade of issues, from chargebacks or order cancellation. Like, it's a big deal.
Yes.
And so I remember thinking, okay, I'm going to have to wrap all 52,000 bars of this soap myself, because Josh is not a good wrapper. And as at that time,
not your skill set.
That was not his skill set. So we were at that time, we were hand wrapping each bar soap. We had a very specific way we were tying the bow on the bar soap. It was called the goat ear bow, where the ears of the bow were shorter than the tail of the bow. And so it was a very specific way it had to be done. And so I was wrapping, like I would say 18 hours a day. And we finally got down to, like, I would say a month before the order had to ship out. And Josh was like, there's no way you're going to get this done. And I'm always an optimistic thinker. Josh calls it magical thinking. And I said, I can get it done. And like I had shaved off like, when we started, it was 22 seconds to wrap each bar of soap. And I had gradually over time shaved it down to 7 seconds per bar of soap. You know, just because of repetition, and you just how to lay everything out and make it easy. Assembly line. And he stood outside the door. I was wrapping the bars of soap on our dining room table. He stood outside the door of the dining room and timed me, unbeknownst to me. And he said, okay, I have done this calculation. And if you stayed here for 24 hours a day for the next 4 weeks, wrapping bars of soap, you would still not get this done. And I'm a hard numbers guy. So when someone shows me the numbers, like even when I'm reading scientific studies and things like, I'm like, oh, that's the number, you know. And that's what made it click to me. No, I won't get it done. And I remember going down we were still doing online orders too, you know, and they were slowly growing. And so I would go down to the post office every day to deliver our online orders, you know, to ship out at the post office. And I remember the post mistress there, who I was very good friends with by this point. Her name was Maria. And she was just asking me, oh, how's your day going? I'm like, oh, Maria, I don't know what we're going to do. I don't know how we're going to get this order done. And she's like, you know what? I know every person in this village. And she's like, I'm just going to call people and say, oh, are you free? Can you go over to the Beekman and help them wrap bars of soap? And she did. She basically did a phone tree, starting with like anybody she knew who was retired, any housewife who had kids in school who maybe had some free time during the day, you know. So she did this phone list. And I would say probably in our village of about 547 people, there were about 20 people who said, oh, I've got time, I can do this. And so they came over, and for the next, 4 weeks, we had people in our dining room working around the clock, helping us wrap those bars of soap for free because we couldn't afford to pay them. They did it for the sense of community and for the desire they had to help a neighbor out. And that's why we still call to this day, from that instant, we call all of our customers neighbors. And we say our company grew neighbor by neighbor by neighbor. And we got that order out. And that's really what established Beekman 1802, because over the next couple of years, we grew with Anthropology. They helped us launch our next 4 products in our line. Their customer base helped us do so much research about what was impactful about the goat milk. And what they were telling us was what led to all of the subsequent scientific research I did on goat milk. And it all came down to like being at your lowest level and saying, no, I'm going to figure my way out of this, and staring at some goats. And that's how Beekman 1802 was born. That was a long-winded way to tell you the story, Mark, but that's it.
It's such a fascinating story, and there's so many different pieces of it, so many different lessons in there. And I love that goat wisdom actually reads less like a business manual and more like a collection of truths that have been earned through the experience. And you've been able to share some of those. I'm curious, looking back, what inner shifts between you and Josh made the biggest impact on the outer success of the company?
What do you mean by inner shifts? Like
beliefs, because you had talked about you grew up in the city. You grew up in the country, but then you moved to the city, you got the success. But there had to have been some belief shifts that happened in there.
Yes, and I think the biggest belief shift was going back to your roots, because, as I said, we had moved to New York City. We were kind of in that realm of your career is your identity. In New York City, we lived in a 14-story apartment building. I think there were 52 apartments in the building. I think we knew 2 other inhabitants, in the whole building. You went to work, you did your job, you came home exhausted, you went to bed. Like that's how it was to live in New York City and live and thrive in New York City at the time. And I think by going back to the farm, it reconnected us to a couple of things. One, the importance of community. How the world does not function unless you are reliant on one another. Isolationism will never be the answer to anything. Um, we learned that people, the way you can connect the most intimately to people is to honor what they have expertise in, and acknowledge that. And I think, when we moved to, the village of Sharon Springs, we knew nothing about farm life. We made our connection to our neighbors by saying, you know what, we want to start raising chickens. We see you have chickens. How you're experts at that. How do we learn from you? And people, that's the easiest way to make connections to people is say, oh, I'm acknowledging you as an expert. You are the expert. I want to learn from you. And maybe it's ego stroking, and it is. We're all ego driven, no matter who we are in life. And so we learned the power of that, like acknowledging other people's expertise, no matter what field it's in. And so power of community, acknowledging people's expertise, and then also that desperation is the best motivation. I don't think anybody reaches their true potential, unlocks their best strategic thinking or their best approach to innovation from a place of comfort. I just don't think it happens. You have to hit rock bottom in some way. It doesn't always have to be a financial way, but you have to hit personal rock bottom in some way in order to turn on that portion of your brain that will help you get out of that and make the breakthrough. And I think that's what we did.
And like you said, there was a lot of pressure on you, a lot of stress, and it was amazing to hear the story. Again, being a medical doctor and all the work that you've done with Mount Sinai, and then to being on the Martha Stewart show, and then to be so humble to be taking the boss of the train, or you were actually driving.
That's the way I was driving the truck in when I had to go every day. Yeah.
Amazing. So I'm from, I grew up in Hudson, New York.
Okay. That's not too far away.
Not too far at all. Yeah. Exactly. And so I know the distance to drive there, and I know so many people who live down there and they make that trek all the time. But for you to be going into stores, again, when sales wasn't your background, I'm just imagining the fear, the trepidation, or was it just pure excitement, or was it just like desperation? I need to make this happen when you were going door to door like that, first with no proof of concept.
That was desperation for sure. And I think even making that trip every day, once we got the opportunity at Henry Bendel, it was still desperation, right? Because now not only were we out of money, now I had to pay gas money to and from New York City area. Like it was a financial commitment to take advantage of the opportunity. There was still that desperation. But also I have always been a very curious person. And I think that's what made me excel in both business and in healthcare. Like I'm always interested in learning how something is done or why something is happening. And so I think when I was there at Henry Bendel, learning from these salespeople, it's out of curiosity. I'm like, oh, that's how you do it? Like that's how you're successful at selling your product? It was just a level of curiosity. And so I think that those were the two things, the desperation and my personal curiosity of things.
I'm thinking about Steve Jobs said that you can only connect the dots looking backwards. And I'm curious, one, about your background with Martha Stewart and Mount Sinai. Were you using those to help open doors or to help close contracts? And what other things, how else have they served you?
It's interesting that you asked that. No one else, we do so many interviews based around this book, and no one else has really asked that in that way. I would say that we used the connection with Martha Stewart in the way we did do an episode on her show where we were making the R's of soap. And that actually was a lesson in humility for me as well, because, my division had folded, because of the recession, but still I took that as a personal failure. I at that point in time, I didn't blame it on the recession. I blamed it on, well, I wasn't successful enough at establishing this business division so that it could withstand the recession. Like I took that as a personal failure. And so when we were in this situation, it was really tough. Even though Martha and I had a great relationship in the business and out of the business on a personal level, it was really hard for me to make the phone call with my hat in my hand, basically saying, Martha, you know what? I'm trying this new venture. Could we please come on the show for exposure to this video? Like, it was really hard to make that phone call. Mm-hmm. But I did because, I had to. And I would say this, that was helpful, but it wasn't like the thing that made, our business, didn't establish our business. It was great, but it didn't establish our business. And then interestingly, when we were on the floor at Bendel talking and telling the story of this product, at that point in time, we had not done any of the hardcore research that we subsequently done on goat milk. So the only thing that I had to tell was the romance of farm life, right? Because I couldn't utilize my expertise in longevity or in research to sell this particular product because I had not done the research to understand why goat milk was important. So the only thing I had at that point was the story of, we're starting over on this farm in upstate New York, and here's the product that we're making from this farm. So I couldn't at that point utilize any of, most of my background. I was learning new skills and thinking, okay, what is the story that's going to work with the sale of this product? So in the early days, that was, and even for a big portion through the time period at Anthropology, the romance story of farm life was the only thing that we had to launch the company on, because it wasn't until like year 6 or 7 into the company where we had the resources, the financial resources to actually do hardcore scientific research on goat milk. And at the same time that there was a deeper understanding of skin barriers, skin microbiome, where we could apply what we're learning about goat milk to what these new understandings of were around the barrier of the skin and the skin microbiome. And so then that took the company to its next stage of skin health. But that's really where my medical background and scientific background started to kick in.
I love it. And then early on, because I want to make sure for anybody that's listening, we don't leave a hanging loop. The first big order that you got, everybody in the community came together. You got the order out. Everything worked out with that order. Did that help make it? Were you over the hill then?
No, we weren't over the hill then, because we were only making five
cents a bar.
But what it gave us a lot, again, Anthropology gave us a lot of exposure. We did a lot of, touring around to different Anthropology stores and doing kind of like meet and greets and things like that. And what happened was that Josh learned, even while outwardly we looked like we were making steps, and we were gradually making steps and becoming more stable. There was no way that we were going to grow this business and come out from under $1 million mortgage. Like, it was still, even when we were national with Anthropology, like that was not happening, and so we got to the point where Josh said, okay, I'm going to go back to the city and see if I can find a job. But at this point, the recession had kind of started to resolve. And so things were starting to open up a little bit, and we needed health insurance. Like, we, had to be realistic. Mm-hmm. And so he started looking for jobs back in the city, and really just applied for anything that was in the kind of media, creative, marketing, advertising space. Like, if there was a job posting, he was going to apply for it. And so there was this job posting from Discovery Networks for a new channel that they were going to launch called Planet Green, which was devoted to like sustainable living and that kind of thing. And they were looking for a chief marketing officer. And Josh's skill set wasn't necessarily aligned with that, but it was media and it was kind of creative. And he's like, I could probably do this. And so he went in and met with the president of the network for this job. And she was very blunt in the interview. She's like, I don't think you're exactly what we need in this role, but wow, your story is so fascinating. These two city guys who lost everything and they moved to this tiny village and like they're making a go of it. And she's like, I think this would make such an interesting docuseries on our new channel. Now, these were the very beginning stages of reality TV. Like this was pre-Housewives, pre-anything like that. And so we were like, oh, should we do this? Because we're not really naturally extroverted people. We're not performers. We're like, do we want cameras like watching us do things? And so we thought about it for a while. And she's like, well, let me just hook you up with this production company. You could talk to them about what the logistics of this would look like. And so we met with them, this production company called World of Wonder. And they kind of walked us through the logistics of it. We said, listen, because we're risk adverse people. So we're always trying to hedge our bets, We're like, okay, listen, we have to maintain good standing within this little community, because we are dependent upon them to help us on the farm, grow this company. Like we are in it with this community of Sharon Springs. So we cannot do anything that is going to make this community look bad. And there were some other shows that were just starting out around that time, Duck Dynasty, Honey Boo Boo, Swamp King, something like that. So the genre that was kind of percolating at the moment was, let's make fun of rural people, And so we were very apprehensive. And so we told the production company, listen, we'll give this a try. However, you cannot make fun of anybody in our community. Everybody in our community has to be the hero of the show. You have to make fun of us because at the end of the day, like the success rate of any TV show is like minimal, and so like at the end of the day, if the show is not successful, we still have to work with these people and we want them to have come out of the experience looking better than when they went into the experience. And to the credit of both Planet Green, the channel, and World of Wonder, the production company, that's what they did. And so we became the butt of the joke of the show. Our community, everybody in our community became heroes. They made everybody in the community look like Mayberry, and so, we had by that point, we'd established a little shop in our town in Sharon Springs on Main Street, and people started coming to Sharon Springs from all over. They would see the show and they would come over, to come to the store to see us, of course, but everybody in our town became kind of quasi-celebrities. So when they came to town, even if we weren't there in the shop that day, if they saw Mayor Doug or they saw Baker Deb or lo and behold, Farmer John, he was like the golden guy. Like you saw Farmer John, like you've seen it. Everybody became kind of stars and people saw them as stars. They're like, I saw Farmer John. Like that became the thing. And I would say that shows probably what helped us really establish ourselves, not from a pure sales perspective, because this was a small channel and a small, show, but from the perspective of establishing Beekman as this brand about kindness, about hard work, about neighbors, about community, that established the DNA of the company and also gave us the receipts, right? Because so many companies these days will come up, they'll conceptualize their purpose, they'll conceptualize their story in a room, and then they go out and try to sell that story to people. No, people have been with us from the beginning of the story. They have seen it. Like, of course, this story is so fantastic, you couldn't make it up. But still, like, it's there. Like, and it's evidence for 20 years, of this brand and how it developed. And so that was the most amazing thing that came out of that period. Both some stability, some growth to the company, but really, really laying down the DNA of what Beekman 1802 would become.
And it has become a $150 million business now. I'm imagining you're not wrapping your own soap.
No, but we don't. But what we have instilled in the company is this culture of kindness. And we talk about this, there's an entire chapter devoted to it in Goat Wisdom. And we've been very deliberate in every aspect to make sure that every person who comes in contact with us as a company feels that kindness. And that's whether it's a manufacturing partner, whether it is a retail partner, any of our vendors, anybody who comes in contact with Beekman understands coming in that this is a culture of kindness. And when they exit the company, they exit with kindness as well. And they take that somewhere else. I think that's been more than anything, probably the linchpin to our success, is this notion that this is a company that creates a culture of kindness, that lists kindness as an ingredient on every product because it truly is an ingredient in our success. And it creates ripples of kindness no matter where people go once they interact with us, whether that's a neighbor, a customer who buys our product. What ripple of kindness do we start within them and within their lives? If it's an employee who comes to us for a short time and then they go on to something else, how do they take what they've learned at Beekman in a different direction, that kindness? That's who we are.
And I don't know if you know, but that's one of the 4 core pillars of conscious capitalism is having a stakeholder model.
Okay.
The stakeholder model means that everybody's involved, your vendors, your customers, like you said, the whole community feels like they're invested in this. And I really love that approach. And you're a wonderful leader in so many different ways. This is Leading with Purpose podcast. I'm curious, what does leading with purpose mean to you?
I think it is, and this is how we think about kindness in our company too. It's transparency. I think that it's very easy as a company grows to have silos. It's very easy for competitive tensions to develop. And I think transparency with everybody from the very moment that they step foot within your company is so important. What is the goals and objectives of the company at the top level? And what is the personal goal and objective for that team member that they need to meet in order to meet the company's objectives? And then even beyond that, and this is thinking like 3, 5, 6, 10 years down the line for that particular individual, what are their personal goals and objectives? And how are you as a leader in your company going to help them achieve their personal goal beyond their contribution to your company? And that motivates people in a way you would not believe. Because yes, everybody who comes into your company is not going to be a lifer in your company. And I think most companies, that's what we're finding with Gen Z, right? Like nobody is committed to be a company person these days.
Right.
So in that period of time that you have them in your ecosystem, how are you going to help them get to the next level that they want to be at, even if it means it's outside of your company? Because if they feel that you are committed to helping them reach their next level and their goatness, their greatest of all time achievement, they're going to give you more in the process, because every day they come to work, they're just not helping the company meet its objectives. They're taking one step closer to meeting their objective, their personal objective. And so we lead with radical transparency in the company. We say radical transparency is kindness. And that's why we say there is a difference between being nice and being kind. Like if you come into this company, these are the objectives of the company. These are your personal stated objectives. Here's how we're going to get there. If we or you are not doing the things that are going to get you there, then here's how we need to change the direction, or here's how we're going to exit you out of the company and put you off into the direction you need to be. So yeah, that's how we do it.
That is beautiful leadership. And I love that discernment between being nice and being kind.
Yeah. We get people really get caught up in that. And part of that is driven just by how kindness and gratitude and things show up on social media. Like people, like one of the banes of my existence are like memes like kindness is free, or sprinkle kindness everywhere. Like I really don't like that, because they devalue how hard being kind is. Being kind is hard work because it means being empathetic. It means stepping outside your personal comfort zone to offer kindness to someone. And I don't like it devalued. Being nice, on the other hand, is something that you can hold a door open for someone that's nice. That's civility.
And you can be nice to somebody that you're not kind to, not
correct.
Don't care about.
Kindness should, in people's minds, be thought of as hard work, and it should be thought of as something that takes effort, and that because you have put in that effort, there is a reward to that effort, either personally or to the person that you bestowed the kindness upon. So I don't like it. I don't like kindness devalued in any way.
I got so much from this conversation, but I have goosebumps. Like I'm thinking about a whole blog around this topic. Brent, your book, Go Wisdom, How to Build a Truly Great Company, was published by the Harvard Business Review, and it's available on Amazon. Your website is Beekman 1802. That's Beekman 1802. And you still have your storefront as well?
We do in Sharon Springs, New York. You can visit us right there on Main Street. And what you're seeing here behind me is our shop in LaGuardia Airport in New York City. So if you're visiting New York City and happen to be going through LaGuardia, stop by and say, hi, neighbor.
That's fun. Yeah, we fly out of LaGuardia or Kennedy every once in a while. So at a JFK. So I'm looking forward to seeing you in person at the Soulful Leadership Retreat. And hopefully we can hang out and have dinner with Josh and Ed and Sally sometime. I'm again incredibly grateful. Thank you for sharing your time and wisdom. I'm curious if there's anything else that you would like to share before we say goodbye.
I would just say, if people do take the time to read Goat Wisdom, which, by the way, is greatest of all time wisdom, I thought about goats. Please share, come to our website and share what your wisdom is. We firmly believe everybody has wisdom to share. And so share it. Don't be afraid to share it.
But I appreciate you shining your light. Everyone listening here, staying to the end, I appreciate you for being here and for sharing your wisdom. Keep shining your light.
Thanks, Mark.
Thank you, Brent. We'll talk to you soon. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Leading with Purpose. We hope today's conversation has inspired you to lead with purpose and make a meaningful impact. If you're ready to discover where you stand on your leadership journey, I invite you to take the Soulful Leadership Assessment. It's a powerful tool to help you align with your leadership style and your true purpose.